So,
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kimberly Landrum, and I'm one of the education consultants at OVEC, which is Ohio Valley Education Cooperative. And I'm just so happy you guys are here with us today.
and I am Grace Absher. I'm a special education inclusion consultant at GREC, or Green River Regional Educational Cooperative.
Hello, I am Marissa Waddy, and I am a special education consultant with NKCES, or Northern Kentucky Cooperative for Educational Services.
Hello, I'm Christina Hill from GLEC, or Greater Louisville Education Cooperative, and I am so happy to be here with you guys today.
Again, welcome everyone. We're so happy you can make it. We are going to be presenting on co-teachers can do anything virtually, even station teaching. We're so happy that you are able to join us. This webinar was developed by a task group from the Kentucky Special Education Cooperatives. Some members of the task group will be presenting today's information. We value your input and hope you'll provide feedback on the information presented by using the QR code that will be shown at the end of the presentation. There are three important methodologies to consider when talking about co-teaching. These include, first, high-level practices, which were developed by the Council for Exceptional Children and the Cedar Center, and include 22 essential techniques that can be used across a variety of classroom contexts. These high-level practices are organized around 4 aspects of practice, which include collaboration, assessment, social, emotional, behavioral, and instruction, and provide a roadmap for effective instruction for students with disabilities. Second, we have evidence-based practices. And third, we have John Hattie's work pertaining to effect sizes. It is important that these are the foundation to our teaching, regardless if we are co-teaching in the traditional brick or mortar classroom or the virtual classroom. Links to these resources will be available at the end of the presentation. John Hattie's book examines a variety of strategies and interventions in order to determine which ones are the most effective. When choosing an intervention or strategy, teachers should implement ones with an effect size of at least 0.40 or higher, known as the zone of desired effects. On this slide, we have a list of several components or strategies that have an effect size of 0.40 or higher. Most of the items listed are things that a teacher can control or at least influence during teaching in the traditional brick and mortar setting. However, I also believe that we can control or influence several of these during the virtual setting as well. For example, feedback can be provided in both settings. Instructional quality and quantity should be a focus on both settings as well. Direct instruction, a must for students with disabilities, can be implemented in the brick and mortar setting or the virtual setting. Remediation can take place easily in a co-taught setting through small group instruction virtually or in person. Class environment, engagement is critically when you're teaching virtually, as we all have learned, as well as in person, and effective use of questioning. The point of this slide is to highlight how much we can control or influence in order to ensure effective instruction is being implemented in co-taught classes, regardless if it is in the traditional brick and mortar setting or the virtual setting. The point of bringing these different strategies or interventions up is to reiterate that during this uncertain time, we need to focus on being an effective co-teacher And we do that by focusing on what we know works, which includes, once again, high-level practices, interventions that yield a high effect sizes, and one component that we haven't specifically addressed yet, which is ensuring specially designed instruction is being implemented for students with disabilities. So let's briefly touch on SDI. In co-taught settings, co-teachers must incorporate the use of specially designed instruction, or SDI, for students who are receiving special education services. Although SDI can sometimes be viewed as something completely different because we may change the level of intensity or duration, in reality, SDI focuses on the same three methodologies previously described. The high-level practices, the Hattie's high-yield effect sizes, and evidence-based practices come together in a co-taught setting with a focus on incorporating specially designed instruction that specifically addresses the unique needs of students receiving special education services. This graphic, put out by KDE, shows the outline for improving outcomes for students with disabilities through SDI. If you look under the methodology heading on the left-hand side of the slide, you will see the three methodologies we keep referring to throughout this presentation. It is imperative that we focus on these methodologies in order to ensure effective instruction and effective instructional techniques are being used for students with disabilities in a co-taught classes, which in turn will typically help all your students. In addition to focusing on the three methodologies previously described, when co-teaching, these are two great questions to consider or to ponder. First, what is happening in the lesson to require two teachers to teach it? And second, are both teachers being used effectively? Let me repeat the questions again. First, what is happening in the lesson to require two teachers to teach it? And second, are both teachers being used effectively? One of my favorite quotes is, I have found the greatest positive effect on students is to be in rooms where the specialist is doing something special. In this context, the lesson would require both teachers to teach the content, and both teachers' skill set would be effectively utilized. In order to answer yes to both of these questions, co-teachers must plan. Therefore, I'm going to turn it over to Grace so she can discuss co-planning with you all.
As emphasized by John O'Connor, the most effective use of both teachers, whether it is face-to-face or virtual, is when both certified teachers are routinely conducting small group instruction. For this to happen, however, there needs to be co-planning between two teachers. I therefore challenge my fellow special education teachers to let your voice be heard. Reach out to your regular education teachers. Initiate scheduling a 1-hour weekly planning meeting virtually and share your intention of helping lessen the student-to-teacher ratio, addressing the wide range of student needs, and providing the student this specially designed instruction for your students with disabilities. Offer this co-planning process with your co-teacher. Invite them to gather key information about the week to be planned, so that during the actual 60-minute planning during your virtual meeting, you can both discuss key instructional points. As a result, you as the special ed teacher or the specialist can prepare the unique materials with the SDI in place. We cannot stress how important it is to have this critical conversation with your co-teachers. Share the planning document. Problem solve together. Here's an example of a filled-out weekly co-planning template. We offer you this resource that you can share with your co-teacher prior to the actual planning meeting to help facilitate your planning conversation. With your regular ed teacher as the content expert, invite them to share their knowledge on the objective and standards for the week, and if they already have lesson activities in mind. The boxes in yellow can be filled out by regular ed teachers. During the actual meeting, have a more detailed discussion on the standards and activities so that you can share your ideas on the SDI that could be implemented for each specific activity. The red boxes can be filled out by the special ed teachers. As a result, these lesson activities evolve as a product of both your contributions, the orange boxes. To be specific, if your regular ed teacher is wanting to do a 5-minute overview, you both may decide the appropriate co-teaching structure to be one teach, one assist, or one teach, one produce. Whoever is manning the chat box is assisting or producing. I challenge both co-teachers to take turns leading the short whole group instruction and also to take turn in pulling small groups. Similar to face-to-face instruction, there's stigma to the special ed teacher always pulling their students with disabilities in the back table, as this is not different from pulling students with disabilities out to a resource room. We encourage for both teachers to have close to equal airtime when the co-teaching approach calls for one teacher leading the instruction. As you plan your virtual co-teaching approach, we encourage you to plan for station teaching whenever it's appropriate for the lesson so that both co-teachers can focus on a smaller group of students, allowing your students of more practice turns and feedback, an instructional practice that Kim mentioned to have a high effect size. Again, as the special ed teacher, and once you have more information on the lesson objective and activity, you can discuss with your co-teacher explicit instructions, scaffolding, modeling, and other SDI that your students need for the specific activity. Then, after the meeting, you can prepare or help with the materials needed for the stations and even hot link them on this planning document. Here's a possible product of your co-planning. Thanks to Stephanie DeMichelle for this slide. You have this available in the resources link momentarily. See the notes section in the slides also for more virtual teaching tips. In the co-planning meeting, co-teachers can create and have their groups posted like this to share with their students. Kathleen Tucker, also a blended learning coach, noted how teachers can plan and co-plan for this matter to combine online and offline learning activities in a virtual station rotation lesson and assign each group a small group or virtual conferencing time to meet with the teacher online for their teacher-led station. In planning small groups, teachers can create heterogeneous groupings such as this one. While groups can be homogeneous for targeted instruction, we encourage co-teachers to plan for mixing the groups up. This way, students with disabilities are not constantly in the same small group with a special ed teacher. To increase positive peer exposure is one of the many benefits of inclusion after all. The names of students with disabilities in this example are bolded. You can see that this is an example of heterogeneous small group instruction and station teaching, and that all groups would rotate to every station, including that of the special education teachers. Another consideration to remember when co-planning small groups is to use formative assessments. They should be used to create groups and determine needs of students. Grouping should be flexible, homogeneous and heterogeneous, grouped by readiness or interest level, or grouping can be based on the needs of the students. Here are examples of formative assessments in virtual setting. So to assess prior knowledge, students complete an online quiz as a do now activity as they enter the virtual classroom. Teacher monitors responses and forms groups accordingly for reteaching or enrichment. Teacher screen shares the lesson objective. Student paraphrase the objective in their own words in the chat feature. To assess learning or lesson progress or mastery, students take turns as presenter to share their work to the class. Teachers may assign an online quiz for an exit ticket and follows up with individual students as necessary, using data for tomorrow's small groups. Finally, students submit videos of their work, including think alouds for teacher feedback. Next, Marissa will further discuss co-teaching models.
We wanted to provide a brief review of the co-teaching models available. When keeping students together as a whole group, we have team teaching and the one lead, one assist models. In a virtual world, one lead, one assist easily becomes one lead, while one serves as the producer. The producer can monitor the chat to quickly respond to student questions or comments, monitor student engagement and privately check in with students, and help to facilitate the annotation or other tools that you're using in your virtual session. When dividing students into smaller groups, we have station teaching, alternative teaching, and parallel teaching models available to us. This session is focusing on the power of station teaching in a virtual setting. Station teaching is when a class is divided into multiple groups of 2 or more, and students rotate through each station. The stations must be independent of one another. Station teaching is helpful because it reduces the student-to-teacher ratio. It allows both teachers to actively teach. It allows for differentiating your lessons, and it increases engagement and opportunities to respond. So be sure to take advantage of virtual features to increase response opportunities using tools like polling, annotation, the chat feature, and even hand raising. Also be sure to take advantage of virtual features to increase your feedback opportunities, for example, using the chat box, breakout rooms, and smaller but more frequent small groups or one-on-one sessions. When implementing station teaching virtually, the independent group may be in a breakout room working collaboratively with their classmates, or they may be assigned an asynchronous assignment that they can complete offline. Let's consider what effective teaching within a station model will look like. The overall structure of station teaching usually includes a small group led by the general education teacher, another small group led by the special education teacher or the specialist, and an independent group working collaboratively or on independent practice activities. Additional stations can also be used for other independent or collaborative tasks. The students then rotate through the stations according to your predetermined rotation schedule. So next, we'll explore examples of how this model could be implemented in your virtual co-teaching groups. Let's explore a literacy example. At the elementary level, the stations could be comprised of a differentiated read aloud activity led by the general education teacher, a differentiated vocabulary lesson led by the special education teacher, and an independent station for writing. Note that each station is differentiated to meet specific student needs, as we've discussed earlier in this webinar. At the secondary level, a poetry lesson could be comprised of these 3 stations. The general education teacher could facilitate poetry reading and group discussion, which is also differentiated by reading level and possible reading aloud, as determined by your student needs. The special education teacher could lead a poetry writing station, where specific writing strategies and tools are taught and provided, such as graphic organizers or assistive technology, also based on student need. The independent station could be a collaborative scavenger hunt for literary devices and pieces of poetry. Now let's explore 2 virtual math examples. Here you see an elementary example of an addition and subtraction lesson with stations. The general education teacher leads a group using the number line, while the special education teacher uses the 10 frame as another tool. Both groups are differentiated based on student needs to include additional hands-on manipulatives and differentiated math problems. The independent station could involve a math game that students complete independently or in small groups using the breakout rooms. Our secondary example uses a flipped classroom approach. Students would watch a video of the lesson on their own and then complete a formative assessment. The teacher then develops homogeneous small groups based on the results of this assessment. The group of students who demonstrated understanding of the concept or skill can begin with the independent activity and then move to the general education teacher to participate in an enrichment activity. Their final station with the special education teacher could then focus on applying the skill to a real-world problem. Students that missed a few problems and need additional guided practice could begin with the special education teacher. Then they would rotate to the independent station and finally to the general education teacher for an enrichment activity. For the students who need the most support, the general education teacher will reteach the lesson, The special education teacher will provide guided practice, and the independent station will provide an opportunity for independent practice, but with additional supports in place. Note that you will have access to these slides so that you can take a deeper dive into these examples. Within our virtual instruction, we have to be mindful of accessibility for all of our students. Consider which of your students will benefit from having text read aloud to them, and take advantage of the virtual tools to provide this support. Audio recordings or screencasts can be used to read directions and assignments aloud to students. You can also take advantage of the station teaching model to provide this read aloud to some students while giving others the opportunity to read independently. For writing tasks, be sure to provide models and explicit instruction specific to writing strategies. Also consider how to use peer-assisted learning strategies or peer mentors within your breakout rooms. Finally, be sure to provide math manipulatives for problem solving. There are a wealth of virtual math manipulatives available to us to share with our students. But also consider sending home math kits of hands-on tools for students. Math toolboxes could include whiteboards, counters, number lines, and other tools specific to your grade level and individual student needs. Next, we'll consider how to ensure active student engagement within our virtual co-teaching settings with Christina.
All right, so let's talk about active student engagement. Part of effective instruction is providing opportunities for students to actively engage with the content and have opportunities to practice turns and quality feedback. We're going to look at a few powerful engagement strategies today that will increase active engagement in the learning process by requiring that each student provide multiple responses during instruction. So the teacher will ask a question or provide directions that require every student to respond rather than calling on a student one at a time. The more opportunities our students have to practice a skill, the more likely that skill will be mastered. And research has found that practice is a strong indicator of overall success. In contrast with active engagement, when a teacher calls on a student one at a time, students are actively engaged less than 1 minute each hour. Research also shows significant correlation between high levels of engagement and improved attendance and achievement. So one of the benefits of station teaching is the ability to actively engage all of our students in that small group, which allows teachers to formally or informally assess each student's progress along the way. After 2 weeks, we tend to remember most what we say and what we do. So that's an indicator also to actively engage all of our students by having students respond orally or in a written form, and by having them practice by doing. So we're going to look at active engagement strategies for each direct instruction component. This is a document that houses tons of active engagement strategies. We're not going to go through the whole document, but a link will be provided for you at the end of today's session. And we're going to look at a few of these strategies today with a virtual option. And we've added that virtual option because many schools right now are providing some type of virtual instruction. Now, if you are providing virtual instruction, our guiding question should be, what virtual tools can my students use to engage with the content? And so there are many interactive tools that may be used within virtual platforms. For example, Zoom uses annotation tools, polling tools, chat boxes, breakout rooms, and so much more. So you might want to research the platform that you're currently using, find and use all the interactive features that are available for you and your students. So for the sake of time, we're going to look at 3 active engagement strategies. The first strategy is take a stand. So this strategy helps set the stage for learning by motivating our students through controversy and giving students a purpose for reading. A virtual option for this may be to use Padlet. And Padlet is essentially a virtual wall where students may post virtual sticky notes and write their stance on that sticky notes, like, for example, zookeeping. Another virtual option may be to do a poll for or against zookeeping. Either options are great because it provides each student an opportunity to engage and develop an interest in the upcoming topic. Students may then read an article on zookeeping, revisit their stance because maybe something they've read in the text has changed their opinion on zookeeping. So this is an opportunity to break into station teaching based on interest rather than skill level. While in station teaching, teachers may increase a student's opportunity to respond and engage with their content by reflecting on their learning. So the outcome statement strategy helps students summarize and reflect on the lesson or the target skill. Teachers will provide a prompt or a series of prompts about the day's lesson. For example, I now understand how to, or I see the connections between, and then all students will provide a response, either written or orally. And some virtual options for this may be to create a Padlet. Maybe you're going to do a Google form with the prompts in there. Or you could share your Google slide with your students, and students may use the annotation tools to write their responses directly on that Google slide. Or maybe you're going to have students chat in the chat box or open up the mics and you guys can share that way as well. Our last active engagement strategy is sequencing cards, which provides an opportunity for all students to sequence information. Teachers will create a card or cards and provide them to their students in random order, and then students are tasked with putting the cards in the correct sequence. For example, you might have students sequence the scientific method, maybe the steps to solve a math problem, or sequence a story. A virtual option for this may be to use Jamboard, which allows students to arrange virtual cards in the correct sequence. So many of our resources mentioned in today's webcast may be found by scanning this QR code or by entering the URL address noted in the slide in your browser. So take a moment to do that. But remember, co-teachers can do anything virtual, even station teaching, which it seems hard, but it's actually very doable. Today, we focused on station teaching because it provides the greatest benefits for students by reducing the student-teacher ratio, allowing for both teachers to actively teach, allowing for differentiated lessons, and increased engagement and opportunities to respond. Please take a moment to provide feedback regarding this webcast. You may either scan the QR code on the slide or enter the URL address in your browser. We thank you guys so much for joining us today. You guys are the heroes, so we heartfully thank you for everything that you guys are doing. Feel free to contact your regional special education cooperative for follow-up support on this topic.